So one of the things that's been all over the news lately is this phenomenon of AI robots making up legal cases, and then lawyers are filing them in their briefs. This has had pretty disastrous consequences for the lawyers that have been caught doing this. Why this keeps happening is kind of a mystery, the way legal research is supposed to be done, but it's also not surprising. And one of the things that I find is really odd is that once this happened one time and people were aware last year that this could very easily happen, why people aren't being more and more diligent to making sure that they're checking every single case that they're citing to a court before they file it with the court, because people are getting more than just a slap on the wrist for this. They're getting hit with sanctions and all kinds of things from the court system. So Patrick, why does this keep happening? How does this keep happening? Because AI was one of the things that was promised to lawyers was going to make legal research so much faster, so much quicker, but there seems to be a few drawbacks.
I know anything like ChatGPT that's like open sourced, they're getting information from all over the place, and they could be pulling in a law school hypothetical, for instance, and then turning it into a case, right? And because it can't distinguish between what's real and what's not real. And hypotheticals have good training value to them, but when it comes to putting your hypothetical in a case brief, it's probably not going to get you very far.
Let me pause you right there. So you're saying that when a law school like gives an exam or gives an assignment to a group of law students and they cite up some kind of crazy case, like we always have these in law school. This is for anybody who didn't go. This is a very common thing. They give you like kind of this bizarre set of facts and they give people kind of these silly names. And, and it's something like, Mickey Mouse, falls off of a cliff and Minnie pushes him. And, did Mickey Mouse assume the risk? Like these kind of concepts. And then you have to write, well, Mickey was aware that the cliff was very high and that it could be a fatal if he fell and, all these kinds of things. These things are winding up on the web. And AI can't distinguish whether that silly set of facts that any human would say, that's bizarre and crazy and obviously not real. And it's basically pulling them with all the other legitimate legal research and handing it to lawyers.
The lawyers are then including them in briefs, and some pretty high-profile attorneys have done this, right? I've downloaded a new browser called Comet, which is pretty amazing, and it uses AI. So I did just a general search for hallucinated AI cases, and this is what it came up with.
And we'll hope that our AI agent is not hallucinating when it finds this for us.
Yeah. So that's my search term in the browser, and this is what it came up with. This is all powered by Perplexity. So this is a database where this guy keeps an entire database. We'll take a look at that in a second. And you've got an Axios article. It looks like from 9/2/2025, 17 AI hallucinations rock Iowa federal courts. And then Mike Lindell, AI hallucination, and Mike Lindell, the My Pillow guy, serves as a stark warning. And this article cites this website right here. And these are just some incidents. So you have a court case, and since 2023, at least 120 legal proceedings have involved lawyers submitting court filings with AI-generated hallucinated citations, including fictitious case law. A case involving they just call it the Morgan & Morgan case. This is a high-profile New York case where lawyers used ChatGPT to generate legal citations, many of which turned out to be completely fabricated. The matter resulted in professional embarrassment, judicial sanctions, and new requirements for human review of AI-generated legal files. This is from, I guess, that article. An Iowa federal case showed even lower courts are grappling with fake AI-generated filings. Fines for attorneys misusing AI in this way have reached up to $15,000.
So let's talk about how and why this might keep happening. I had no idea that this has happened 120 times, at least it's been documented. I remember last year, kind of the first time that it happened, it was a really major news story, and it was kind of an embarrassing thing for AI, and it was also an embarrassing thing for the attorneys. But it just keeps happening, and I find that really surprising because just so people know who don't do legal research. One, legal research has been done online for 25, 30 years now. There's companies that spend a lot of money and that law firms pay a lot of money to have subscriptions to do research And they have all these tools that basically find cases for you, right? And one of the things that was an obvious use for AI was to find and summarize cases, because it takes a lot of time for a human being to go through and read several pages of cases. Sometimes you're finding hundreds of them to try to, insert into a legal brief or make your argument. You're trying to find very particular facts that most fit your client's set of facts. So it takes hours and hours of research if you're reading through all of these cases. So an obvious use for AI was to take a set of cases, or say, pull me all of the cases on this issue and summarize the facts and find the ones that most closely match the set of facts that my client has, right? And if it would work, that would save an attorney, especially somebody with a small staff, a lot of time and potentially a lot of money for your client if they're paying hourly. So this was really a great tool, and in theory, it still is. So what can attorneys do to make sure that the cases that are being pulled are legitimate?
Confirm that they are legitimate.
How would you do that? Like traditionally, you always had to check cases to make sure they haven't been overruled, right? Like you have to go in and check every single case that's cited to make sure that there's not been any negative treatment by other courts. So why is it not being caught?
We use Nexus and their platform. Other attorneys might use Westlaw. I think there's another one called Case Text that some attorneys are using, but we use Lexis, and there's a whole system that they've developed called shepherdizing a case. But their website is contained. So they have an AI component that my understanding is they contain all of the information to within existing cases. So there's not the potential for outside information getting in. Whether or not there's a threat that it could create some kind of jumbled information and combine two cases or something. So you still have to read your cases to make sure. But going through the Lexis database, you pull up the case and it tells you how that case has been treated, how many times it's been cited, whether it's gotten negative treatment, whether it's gotten positive treatment. And then all you got to do is click on those citations to find out whether or not it's been overruled, or whether the issue that you're looking at has been negatively impacted. And then if it has, then you just continue down that trail with the new cases, right? And that speak to your issue. But what people are doing is getting lazy is what it comes down to.
Yeah, I think it's catching lazy lawyering and lazy research. And just to be clear, to do legal research properly and ethically, it requires a lot of work, and it requires a lot of checking your work. Like you hated that concept in school when you had to check your work going back to third grade. You're doing long division and you have to go check it. But you really have to do that in legal research, because the summaries have existed in Lexis for decades, right? And for decades past, the shepherdizing system, which is where they verify whether the case is still good law or not, required human beings to read through cases and flag them if they refer to other cases. And the system would do that for you, because otherwise you really don't have any way of knowing whether a court in another jurisdiction or a court, 6 months ago basically overruled this case or gave it some kind of negative treatment, said, this is not really the way we're leaning anymore. How would you know that, right? It could come out of anywhere. So the system of Lexis, they had all the cases and they had all of the jurisdictions. And so anytime a case would refer to another existing case, it would catch that. And I would assume they used human beings for this for a really long time. And the other thing that it would do is it would create summaries, like if you look up a statute, and it would have summaries of cases referring to that statute. So if you're looking up a statute for, say, DUI, what is DUI less safe? Well, they had all these cases, right, that would say, 1976 less safe was deemed to be, this definition, and all these that fit under the criteria. But you have a duty to go beyond that. You have a duty to read that case. If you put it in your citation, you are supposed to have read that case. And if it has any kind of negative treatment, you're supposed to have read that negative treatment, and presumably even the positive treatment. You would want to find it if it's positive treatment, obviously, use that case too. But, the assumption is when you file a brief that an attorney on the file, and I guess who's ever signing for it, has read every single case that's in that brief. And I think what this is catching is people are obviously not doing that, or else What was one of those cases that it found? What was the title of it?
This is from DamianCharlatan.com, and he's the guy that created this database. We can just go to the American cases. So you have the USA right here. Clerk of Court v. Rangel. This is one of the cases, the guy that this site, Clark v. JP Morgan Chase Bank, is cited as a...
Are these? I think these are the cases.
These are the real cases.
Yeah.
The real cases.
Yeah, the real cases, and then go in and see what the cases that are cited as being fake.
Yeah, because I was about to say this is from Westlaw, so I was like, man, this looks like a real case to me.
Yeah, and for the viewer, this is what, if you're doing the research and you're pulling the cases and you're reading them, they all kind of look like this. This is like the standard form that the published cases come out in. And for people looking at this, there's this whole system for published cases, and theoretically they come out in these bound books once a year, right? And nobody has those books anymore. But when you go to a law library or to an attorney's conference room, you see these huge bound volumes numbered, 1 through 300 something, right? And that's every year the state's published cases come out, and those are cases from the Court of Appeals and the Georgia Supreme Court, or whatever state you're in. And, it is a lot of tedious time spent reading through these, because what you ultimately cite might just be one sentence in this very long opinion. Some of these opinions might be 50 pages. And you've got to read through all of this, what we call dicta, where it's just kind of talking about the facts, talking about the history of the law, talking about how these cases used to be considered, but now they're considered this way, which you're ultimately not going to use, right? And there's a lot of superfluous information when you're trying to find, I need to know how the courts rule on this particular issue, and how often, how recently, and if this one fits my facts and it's in my favor, I want to know if any court has overruled that, or any cases that are similar to given negative treatment. And it does take a lot of time. And that's, a big part of what a law firm does, is do all that legal research for their clients.
So what are the causes, the types and causes of AI hallucinations? Text generation. Large language models like ChatGPT may generate text containing plausible sounding inventions or errors, especially when asked about obscure topics or when their outputs are not closely verified by a human. Visual recognition and AI vision systems may hallucinate objects, seeing animals and bicycle images, or distort visual data based on overtraining or biased data sets. Underlying causes: hallucinations occur due to limitations in training data, algorithmic biases, inadequate model supervision, or excessive model complexity, leading AI to make up information not grounded in reality.
So the AI is so eager to please and perform its task that if it doesn't find something that suits it, it will just make it up. But this points to a bigger problem, right? This is like a 2025, 21st century problem, in that we are going to be depending on AI for a lot of things, and a lot of things have been promised. And part of the reason that there's been a real lack of delivery is that there are these persistent issues that show you it still has a really long way to go before you can replace people's jobs, right? Like how well they're going to be able to limit these types of hallucinations, put in the guardrails, so to speak, that's going to be really the determining factor as to how useful AI really is in its current iteration, because it's fine if it works 9 times out of 10. But this is one area where it's being used a lot and was promised to be very, very useful and revolutionize an industry. And because it's failing 1% of the time, it has a catastrophic consequence. Like you cannot trust it. This is a scenario kind of like AI operated cars, where the 1% of the time that it fails, it's a catastrophic failure. And I just think this is really interesting because it speaks to people's greater fears about how AI is going to replace jobs and be kind of ingrained into more and more of our society. We're still a long way away. I really think before you can really trust it to do complex tasks like it's being promised to be able to do. Now, do we use AI at work? Yeah, I use it all the time. I've used Lexis AI to find me cases all the time. Yeah, I've used it, and it's very, very useful for that. It's only searching within the Lexis database, I'm told, but I'm going to be even more careful going forward to make sure, because how do I know the Lexis model isn't making up something that looks like the Lexis research? I don't know.
Yeah. Well, we do immigration law, and I like to use AI to search the internet to find circumstances that you hear about, to verify that they're happening, or to get examples. What are the trends in adjudicating certain types of cases and things like that? That AI is very useful in searching the internet to get information, newsworthy information, very well. But also, it searches blogs and everything else to find information, as well as government websites, right? And government memos and everything else. So you can get a lot of information, get access to that information for a specific issue that you're trying to research for a client. We use it for that all the time.
And also medical records, like reviewing, give me 500 pages of medical records. I might only need to find 3 that are relevant, and they're all jumbled up. They're not in chronological order. The dates don't match. The pages are out of sync. And I'll say, find me every mention of a left ankle pain or something like that, and it will find most, if not all of them, very quickly. So there are things that it's really, really good at. Suggesting emails, things that are routine. It starts to kind of recognize your patterns. If you're using it to suggest emails and whatnot, it gets better and better. But, these kinds of things, are everywhere. But I don't think it's not to the point where the AI progenitors, the billionaires at the head of these companies, or the people that are leading this revolution, so to speak, keep getting their legs cut out from under them, because every time they make a large upgrade or something like this, there's cases like this where people have had disastrous results relying on AI without the human interaction that it needs. But the bigger story has been how when it runs amok and it goes awry, that's what's been, a much more spectacular result. And unfortunately, it's been a spectacular disaster for some people.
Yeah. And I mean, for lawyers, this is a major ethical issue, because lawyers we have a duty to be honest with a tribunal that we're before, and presenting false information, whether that's through negligence or knowingly, is still a violation of our professional responsibility. And I think one thing that people don't think about when using AI on these open platforms, if you're sharing your client's information, you're potentially violating your duty to protect your client's information, because you're sharing it on a platform that could potentially be hacked, that might be public, that might be open sourced. So you never know. If something goes haywire in there, and if it's making stuff up, what if it uses your client's information to create a fake case, right? I mean, they could do all kinds of stuff. I mean,
right.
We have closed AI sources that we use that are not open at all. An AI platform to review medical records and everything that is closed. It's not open to anybody else. You have to be careful about that kind of stuff. We have the duty to not delegate our judgment, is another thing, right? So even though AI is pretty smart, it's obviously not smart enough to recognize fact from fiction. So you can't overly rely on the AI. It's a modern day problem in all industries, but I think with the law, it creates a pretty unique challenge for lawyers to make sure that what you're presenting to the court or whatever your tribunal is, that you're being that you're not presenting false information.
What about images and video? So one of the big things that's talked about a lot is deepfakes, and how easy it's going to be able to make deepfakes. We watch commercials now where, the iPhone is on there showing you how easy it is to just eliminate something from a photograph. That's kind of scary, and people who are working in law, especially I think about, family law, we do personal injury. It'd be very easy to go into a photograph of an accident scene, or, something that somebody's using in a domestic case, to just wipe it away, and you can't even tell. And so how are you going to keep people from doctoring photos, which used to be very sophisticated and very difficult to do? So you kind of presumed whatever was in the photograph was real. Now, how are you going to prevent deepfakes, which you can do with the touch of an iPhone screen.
Yeah, I took an image of us and asked one of these AI generators to turn us into superheroes, and it didn't look very realistic.
Put it on the screen and let's see it.
So here's one of them. Not sure what this one is.
So this is taken from our website. I think we have this photograph on our website.
That looks photo. I threw our logo up top, pasted our logo in there just to see what it would do.
And then you just told it to, what was the instructions?
The instructions on this one, I don't know. We'll have to watch it to see. Let's see which one it did. Yeah.
That's superheroes.
That's superheroes. Yeah. So,
I like how yours still has the coat under it. I have the full body suit. It dropped the sport coat for me. I don't know why, but yours kept on. And yeah, I mean, I think I would know if that was real or not. I'm not as worried about that one.
That one's not very tricky. But there's some pretty impressive things people come up with using AIs.
We've used it to create images for like newsletters and things like that. I mean, we don't have in-house art departments, and you wanted to come up with an image, and it does a fairly good image. Sometimes you have somebody with an arm growing out of a head, but you just tell it to do over, right? Like remove the arm from the head, or tell it, make it more realistic. And, why don't we pull some of these up from the internet of like AI image fails?
Now we could probably create one.
Yeah.
We can go to Sora. What would we create?
Do something like an image of, Ben Price.
I don't even know who Ben Price is. Let's see. Doing what?
Winning an award.
Let's see, it takes a second. And then this one, watch his leg on his arm.
Yeah, little things.
Okay, here we go.
That's an example of a factual difference. So that's obviously not me. It didn't find me. There are other Ben Prices.
Winning an award. I love
that its title was Winning an Award.
Ben Price.
So, make sure this doesn't wind up on the web. Right?
Yeah.
Or somebody's going to find that when they're searching for me. My attorney has changed. Obviously.
You're not Ben Price.
Yeah. So it's really funny to me. It's just kind of like the Arthur C. Clarke warning about AI models from the 1960s. If you ever watched 2001, no matter how sophisticated the computer gets, when it has to decide between keeping the mission, when its number one priority is to complete the mission, in that case to Jupiter, versus killing the entire crew so that it can complete the mission, how do you train it not to kill the crew? It's faced with a dilemma that in order to complete the mission, the crew's going to shut it down, so he decides to kill the crew. How do you tell a computer that something that obvious should not be done if you haven't explained that particular set of facts to them in those circumstances? And it's like, as advanced as they can get, it's always that last element of human logic, ethical behavior that's so hard to train into a system of any kind, no matter how sophisticated. Yeah. And that just shows you that I read a book in high school. I think this is something that is not going away. We are going to use AI more and more in business, especially law. Something to watch, something to keep an eye on, because we're definitely going to see AI used more and more in businesses, especially things like law, and hopefully it'll work a lot better, and hopefully there'll be safeguards in place to prevent these things from happening. But also, you cannot remove the human element. Somebody's got to go behind it and check it before you can just rely on it that it's foolproof. And that probably will be the case for all time. It's hard to imagine that you're not going to be able to go behind these things and make sure that they're doing it right. It's kind of like, asking a 12-year-old to do your legal research. They probably can do it. How do you know they're doing it exactly right? That they might lose their way, and just in an effort to get the project done, they just make up a case or two.